So they were sponsored by a farmer up in this little town called Molesworth near Listowel, Ontario. And the building they lived in was like not much bigger than this studio. It was like 880 square feet of a building. 8 people lived in for the whole year. And Grandpa had to basically work for this sponsor for free for a whole year before like they got signed off to be like, you're Canadian and you get to stay.
During the war, my Lola and Lolo tried to escape. It was World War II. And they tried to like get away from the war because at the time they had 3 young children. And so it's called a bunka, the name of a boat. And so they were on this small bunka, probably like the size of this room, not much bigger.
Welcome back to Patio Studio and our final episode of Branches Between Generations. I'm your host, Clinton Nellist, and thank you so much for joining us on this journey. To round out this series, I wanted to remind you guys what the mission of all of this was. The goal was, yes, to make a podcast, but more than that was to connect strangers with each other, to connect generations with each other who normally wouldn't have these kind of opportunities or these conversations. So for our final episode, we have our 2 executive producers, Mark Beuerman and Joy Daniel, and they have brought in their kids in. Mark is going to sit down with his daughter. Joy is going to sit down with her son, and we're going to share some family history. The goal here is to inspire you guys to have similar conversations with your loved ones and maybe even strangers, because it's important to have these intergenerational conversations. It's important to talk about our history, and it's important to bring our community together. So without further ado, let's hear about some family history, with the moral of the story being, we shall not forget where we came from.
Hi, everyone. My name's Joy, and I'm a teacher, high school students, and I'm here with my son, Kaemon, and I'm an executive producer with Branches Between Generations. To be honest, when I came in here for like just like a pre-meeting and I got to sit with the 2 of you and recognize like, wow, it's so important to record our history, because so then it became less of a task, like, I said I would do this, so I'm going to do it. It became like, I think this is an important opportunity to record our history, and not just like, not my history, but like our history. And like, it's beyond like when I'm gone, and honestly, like when my kids are gone, this is like for future generations. And so I was really, really humbled by the fact that we come from a pretty cool history with my parents and with my grandparents, who came from the Philippines and came to Canada. So I'm just super excited that my kids, like when I communicated to my kids, I think this is really important, you guys. Like, this is something that not very many people get the opportunity to do. And if we get to record this for ourselves, even, I don't know if anybody else will learn something from this, but even if we get to do this for ourselves, I think it's an opportunity that we should really embrace. So then I finally got like my 2 older teenage sons on board to be like vulnerable and to be here and to be present. And I think they even want to be here for their own reasons, not just my reasons. I don't know. You think?
Maybe.
Yeah. We'll see. We'll see after this conversation. We get to go back to the Philippines in a couple weeks.
Yeah, for Christmas break.
I'm super grateful that we get to go to the Philippines with my kids, because my mom and dad are there right now, and I haven't been back for 8 years. And so I'm super fortunate in that I was born here in Canada, and my mom came early 70s. I don't even know the year. I think it was like 1973. And she came from a little town called Saysayan, which is near a town called Bagak in a province of Bataan, which is on the island of Luzon, which is in the Philippines. So I only know this because I had the opportunity as I was growing up. My mom, and dad, they didn't have a lot of money. They my mom worked as a nurse, and my dad managed a grocery store. But the money that they did have, they used it so that we could go back to the Philippines every 2 to 3 years. So I'm very, very privileged in that I got to go back to where my parents came from every 2 to 3 years. Because of that experience, I think, have an appreciation and a sense of what the Philippines is and what the people are like. And I'm also grateful for the Filipino community that was part of this northern Alberta town where I grew up. And so I do have a sense of the culture and the food and the richness of the community every weekend. So there was a party every single weekend, and there was tons of food, and it was chaos. And there's people running around. And so I'm so glad that my kids get to come back to the Philippines with me this Christmas and get to experience that for themselves too.
Hi, my name is Mark Beuerman. I'm the owner and founder here at Patio Studio, and I'm here today to tell you a little bit about our family history with my daughter, Arianna, who's been a participant in the podcast. My family history originates from Ontario, actually. Well, it starts back in Germany and on one leg, and it starts in Holland on the other leg from my parents. My dad's family, his grandpa, so my great-grandpa, immigrated here in the 1860s to Ontario. And he came over with his wife and 2 kids, and they lived near Stratford or Shakespeare, Ontario, what is now known as that. And at that time, there was no roads. There was one big trail that led from Stratford to Goderich, which is now known as Highway 8, if you've ever been there. And there was a promise of free land. And so after living there for a few years and deciding they were going to stay, my great-grandpa Ludwig ventured out on promise and looking for this land. So he headed west from Stratford on this trail, which again is now known as Highway 8, and he got to a town, I think it was called Carenbrook, which is now known as Dublin, Ontario. And there was like a couple buildings and a post office there, and the postmaster at the time told him that if he went another mile west and then headed north, the land was there to be claimed. And you would just go, he was told to go as far until he found that there was no trees marked, and then to mark your trees, and that was your claim. But then you had to go all the way to Goderich to register the land. So that trek from Dublin, once he found the chunk of land and marked it with the axe, to Goderich was a 4-day venture for him on foot. Off on this venture to Goderich to register this land, and he gets there and meets with someone named Tiger Dunlop, who was like a member of the Canada Company. And Tiger Dunlop, he actually has statues back in Goderich. He was like one of the men who like developed the Huron Tract of Lake Huron there. And Tiger Dunlop told my grandpa that the land wasn't free and that he needed to pay $3 an acre. And but if he went back, he could strike out the land he needed to farm it and start to produce money and build a house there. And then when he had the, money to pay it back, he could pay it back, and then he would get the deed. There was a big chunk of time there when he, had to clear the land and then move your family there to this new area. Like that would have been incredibly difficult. But ultimately, he was a mason, a stonemason, and some of the houses that my great-grandpa Ludwig are still on Highway 8. Like you can drive by them and see the houses that still stand there almost, 150 years later, almost 200 years later. And the land that he struck out at Lot 6, 7, Concession 8, McKillop Township is where my brother lives and where my dad was raised. So it's a really interesting story. I think it's really cool, and just what he must have had to go through. Like, you think of what we go through now, and you think there's tough times here, but like, man, that guy that's a hard life that, that person lived. So it's just, there's a lot of cool stuff there. So, what do you think of that story? When you hear that story, what does that make you think about of our story of coming here?
It must have been hard for his kids, just like Ludwig's kids. 'Cause
Right.
he was gone for like 10 years without seeing like his kids or his family, and he just wife probably didn't even know what was happening.
Yeah, you wouldn't even have known if he
Yeah.
was
Alive.
around or alive, right? Like you would like literally like gone. It's not like you could send a text and say I'm okay.
Yeah, it's just kind of like, yeah,
Right?
trust that.
The unknown
He's-
of being away from your family would have been hard. And anything like, what do you think when you go back and see that farm? Does it feel like it's 150 years old to you?
The house has definitely been revamped. It's
Right.
if you looked at it, you think, oh, it's an old house, but you wouldn't think that's 100 years old.
Yeah.
Like, it's nice. It's pretty big, and to think that someone built that whole house by himself is just crazy to think, honestly.
Yeah, right.
So what do you remember from the Philippines? Do you remember anything?
When I really think about it, I don't remember barely anything, really.
Any of the pictures? Like what we did?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, the playground was definitely one of the highlights.
So now you're going to be going back. You're almost 16, right?
Mhm.
And I think when I went back when I was 16, I remember my soccer coach encouraged me, like, what are you doing? Why aren't you going with your mom? Like, you should go. And I thought, oh, I'm in grade 11. I can't leave school. And he's like, go. Like, you won't regret it. And I remember that time going back when I was 16, and it's like, oh, I can make a difference in my community here in the Philippines. And that's when I had this tiny little dream to be like, to give back to the community, because I know that I've been given so much, because I got to be a Canadian citizen. I got to like be born here in Canada. And so when we went back 8 years ago now,
Mhm.
we like fundraised, and we like built a playground in my parents' elementary school that they went to. There's no playgrounds barely in the Philippines, and not at the schools. And so we were able to build a playground in the Philippines. And so I think it's super important to know where you come from and to understand like those values that like my parents and my grandparents instilled, so that we can continue to like pass those values on to our kids and to future generations. Yeah, when I started to dig in, so when I was 16, I really didn't know much about my family's history, but when I went back when Lolo passed away, so I was already like 20, before you're born, I think I was around 28 at the time. I went back when Lolo passed away, and I started becoming like really curious. Like, what was Lolo like? Like, what do you remember? And so I started this, like, I did an interview, like, documentary thing, where I started asking everybody, like, tell me what you know about Lolo. Like, what do you remember? And so I started this process. So it's just funny that time goes on and we don't really like document stuff anymore.
Yeah.
But I think it's pretty cool that we'll get to document the lives and some of the things. So what I learned at that time was that during the war, my Lola and Lolo tried to escape. It was World War II. And they tried to like get away from the war, because at the time they had 3 young children. And so it's called a bangka, the name of a boat. And so they were on this small bangka, probably like the size of this room, not much bigger. And when the Japanese were like fighting the Filipinos, they were just going from like beach to beach trying to collect food and trying to keep their little 3 kids safe. And they did. I think they managed for like months, but unfortunately they succumbed to pneumonia. So the 3 little kids all perished, like they all died. And Lola and Lolo, they were devastated and probably sick themselves. And so they went back on land, and like the rest of the war kind of transpired, and there's like the death march from Bataan to Manila, and a lot of people died along the way. I think they got separated, and then there was Japanese occupation after the war. So I think that's like a lot of stuff that people in history doesn't necessarily capture. But so they both endured like a lot, probably separately, but then they found each other again. And then we're able to like keep going, like this enduring and through the pain and stuff. Like I remember my Lola, like her eyes were always like, they always just looked sad to me. And she was a very quiet lady. She didn't speak that much. But I have a feeling that's probably like where some of her sadness comes from.
Mhm.
But at the same time, she was like so strong and smart. And she still able to like raise and have like 6 other amazing like kids. And then there's you guys, and do you have any connection to like our family too?
Yeah, I would say so, especially when we lived in Alberta, when we had our cousins that lived in Edmonton while we were in Okotoks next to Calgary, right? So yeah, I remember going to visit them and just kind of being part of like, because there was I think a lot more culture there than where we were. So going there and kind of going, I remember going to some parties and going to church and
Yeah.
stuff. So I really remember that side
Yeah.
of when we used to live in Alberta.
My uncle, who's the oldest, my uncle Virgilio, my Tito Virgilio, he's like a quiet man, and him and I, honestly, like, I don't know, like, how do you have a relationship with somebody that's like, I don't know how much, 30, 40 years older than you, right? Like, sometimes it's hard to connect. And yet, when I started being curious and asking questions, he just lit up. Like, I always kind of saw him as like serious. But when I started asking him about like, can you tell me more about when you were younger and like what was Lolo like? He's like, oh, like he started telling about like shotgun stories. Like, oh, you don't want to make your Lolo mad. Like, but his eyes like lit up, and he was laughing and he was smiling. So it's interesting, like, I mean, we're family, like we're blood, but I hadn't ever really engaged with him before. And it took me till I was 20, did I say 28 when my Lolo died and I went back, to really like have these like meaningful conversations with my relatives.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's interesting, even with your own like Lola and Lolo, right? Like I know you guys spend time together. They love to like take you guys out, but like having like real conversations, like asking real questions, being really curious about what their lives are like.
Yeah.
So yeah, I encourage you, like we're going back in 2-3 weeks.
I'll definitely think on that more.
Yeah. Like even just going for walks, right? Taking the time, going for walks around the village. Like tell me more about what it was like when you were a kid. Like what did you do when you were 16? But I think like that sense of adventure that our family has is because of them.
Yeah, probably.
Because can you imagine when Lola came over to Canada, it was December.
Yeah.
She was probably like 85, but she's 4'10", like she's tiny.
Yeah.
And at the time when she was 26, she was probably like 80 pounds soaking wet. And she flew in from an international flight into Edmonton, Alberta, and took a Greyhound bus. Freezing cold. Like imagine Edmonton in like December.
It's freezing in Alberta.
It could be like -20, -40. And her coming with what she thinks is a winter jacket and like boarding a Greyhound bus. And I remember she tells me her stories of when she first came to Canada, and she kept asking the bus driver, like the Greyhound bus driver, are we there yet? Are we in High Prairie yet? Is this High Prairie? Because like the bus route of Greyhound like stops at like, I don't know, 8, 10 different tiny towns in the dark, all the way up into, it's like a 4 or 5 hour drive from, probably on a Greyhound is like a 6 hour drive from Edmonton to High Prairie. But she found her community of like other nurses there and some other really super, super kind Canadian families that took her under their wing and like helped her get settled in Canada.
Like my mom, my direct mom, she was born in Holland during the war. And, they fled Holland at the end of the war in 1950. They lived right on the border of Holland and Germany. So they would get occupied. They had German soldiers living in their house, and what little milk they produced and stuff, the Germans took everything they did. And finally, my grandma and grandpa decided to leave. But when they left, you got to think it's 1950. You probably think you're never going to see your family again, right? Because there isn't commercial air travel at that time. Like you don't leave thinking, see you in a year. You leave thinking, I'm going to this new country and I don't know what to expect with my 8 kids, on a boat. And yeah, you know, and to start a new life, right? So, you know, things changed for them because in the 70s, commercial airplanes happened, and by the late 80s, they were able to go back and visit. My grandma got to go back and see her sisters that they left 40 years ago, thinking they never see them again. And that was incredible. But like, you know, so you know, there's like the whole story of how you and I are even here is crazy because of like choices that, you know, difficult choices people made a long time ago, you know, to look for a better life. So it makes you not want to take anything for granted, you know, and it makes you not want to, you know, take a day off really, because it's just like they never could, you know?
Yeah.
So we were reading that. My wife pulled out, there's another book we have at home that my Uncle Ben documented on my grandma's side. And your mom was pulled it out today, and there was like a story. So when they came in 1950, like for them to get citizenship, they had to be sponsored by someone. So they were sponsored by a farmer up in this little town called Molesworth near Listowel, Ontario. And the building they lived in was like not much bigger than this studio. It was like 880 square feet of a building. 8 people lived in for the whole year. And Grandpa had to basically work for this sponsor for free for a whole year before like they got signed off to be like, you're Canadian and you get to stay. So
Imagine
like,
having to live like in the studio for
right,
a whole year
like
with
with
8 people.
like yeah, like your grandma was a baby, like she came over as an infant, so like a 9-month-old, you know, along with 7 other of them. Like yeah, it would have been a crazy life. And then, you know, they got out of that sponsorship and then moved up near Seaforth, and then that's when they finally, that White House that you see on the front and the one that I visited them at, that was where they raised their family. And Grandpa was a carpenter. He wanted to be a farmer, but in Holland, you know, the oldest brother got the land. So he knew he was never going to be a farmer. And so that place where they lived during the war was a rental. Like he tried to be a farmer. He rented land and they lived in this, like, the barns in Holland were like one building. So like you lived in the front and the animals were in the back. Like you were under the same roof. Yeah. So like they lived in a thing like that. And then when they came over that, they lived in this little box for a year before they got their own spot. So
Wow.
yeah, the fact that all that happened is, you know, it's just, again, it's, and then look at us, even me and your mom, we've left all of that to pursue our own dreams and, you know, things. And here we are now on the other side of the country, you know, doing our own thing. So,
As you said, it's just it makes you think of how much you take for granted and how
Right.
much that to us it's normal, to them it's a luxury, you know? Like,
Right. Yeah.
it's just how times have changed, I guess.
Yeah. So, like I told you the story about how Ludwig had to, you know, go and be away from his family for so long. And then one of the biggest parts of this was how they had to move the family to the land he cleared. What do you like if you could go back in time or talk to those 2 little girls that were his daughters, what would you ask them, or what do you think it was like to be them?
You know, I would probably just ask them, like, how it was, like, growing up, you know? Because when he left, they probably weren't very old, you know?
Yeah.
Because he's trying to make a life for his family, so he obviously must have been little. So how was it, like, growing up without, like, having, like, a dad in your life for a lot of the time? Like, you know, as you said, he was gone for, like, 10 years.
Yeah.
without
Back then they
seeing
wouldn't even
them.
have had schools yet. So they wouldn't have been going to a school, right? There wasn't organized education at that point. So like, you know, even just their days would have been,
Exactly.
what did you do? You know, like there would have been, yeah, it would have been interesting to know what they did just to pass the time. And
Especially in, like, you know, because a lot of, you weren't really allowed to play sports.
no, again, well,
It's-
in the 18th, nothing was like they were all just moving here, right? It was all just immigration. Like there was no, that stuff wasn't a thing yet, you know?
You're trying to, like, think, like,
Right?
how? Like,
Yeah.
it's a good question, you
Yeah.
know?
It would have been difficult. And there was a story about how his daughters he would come home with his hands so messed up from building the houses that his hands were just shredded. And so they would wash his hands and then they would wrap it in sheep's fat or goat's fat from the wool or something like that, or fat and lard. And then they'd wrap it in sheep's wool, and he would like sit with his, like, wrap his hands up every day, and he would sleep like that. And then the next day they'd like take it off, and he would, you know, be somewhat healed, and then he would go do it again. Could you imagine? Imagine your hands are so like messed up that you can't, like, and there's no gloves. Like there wasn't, like, you didn't go to Costco and buy gloves, or like go to the glove shop and buy gloves. You know what I mean? Like right? Like, and again, he's a stoneman, so you probably need to feel it, right? Need your hands. So yeah, I found that incredible that he would just, like, his hands were so messed up all the time that, like, it was it was a mess. Yeah, so here it was. George's mother, Barbara, told him many times that she was about 10 years old. She had to bind up her dad's bleeding hands daily. The lime, gravel, and rough stones had worn through the courses of his hands and fingers, and after a good wash, she had to take white woolen cloths after the hands were well greased with sheep's fat, and then wrap and tie the cloths. And by the next morning, they were healed enough to go to work again, just to have the same thing happen again, day after day. That is one of the many hardships they encountered that we know of. Like, and again, like just little glimpse, right? So yeah, you think, I guess it's just a nice reminder that, when you think you're having a bad day, you're probably not. It's and we used to take a lot of stuff for granted, like that it's, and those guys had to put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into what we have now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like, and it's interesting. I got some of that last story I got from my dad this summer because me and dad have been doing the memoir project where we've been recording like like his story as a memoir for preserving it for future generations, your kids and your kids' kids. And but yeah, have you after, I guess you haven't heard much of it. I've shared a few little bits of it, but after doing the things with the people that you did, how did you find that, and have you learned anything from those people?
Learned lots of things. It's been actually a really nice experience to be able to talk to people from different generations and to get their point of view on life and how they were raised and how different it was, and again how greatly we take granted for things.
Mm-hmm. It's more than just technology, right? Like there's just such a gap in how it, how things were back then.
Yeah,
right?
like sometimes, and with technology, sometimes I've seen kids like with their grandparents at restaurants, and they're just like on their phones or on their tablets, and the grandparents are just sitting there, they don't really know what to do, or their kids or their grandkids are just like playing Roblox or something. It's
instead of just communicating and being
instead of just talking. So I mean, it's been a very nice experience of the branches between generations and just having a moment to just talk with these elders and to just learn all this new information.
Yeah. There's so much to learn, right?
Yeah.
You got to think, as you get older, you realize how much you learn every year, right?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Someone who's been here for 60 years, 70 years, 90 years, I mean,
you're never done learning.
Yeah, exactly.
You're always learning new things every single day.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Well, I'm glad you got something out of it. Cool. Yeah. Well, thanks for coming in.
Yeah, no problem.
I hope you like the stories, or I hope you learned something from them.
Got to hear some new story, that's always nice.
Right on.
I hope you get a chance to appreciate it, even though.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how everything turns out.
Mm-hmm. And at the very least, just appreciate it, right?
Yeah.
Like, even if
Appreciate that it's there.
and that other people have certain things that they hold on to when things are hard.
Yeah.
Right? Like, imagine my grandparents, right? On this beach with their kids who didn't make it, and where do you find the strength to keep going? And thankfully they kept going.
Yeah.
I think in today's society there's a lot of mental health. I think there's a lot of heaviness that teenagers have in today's society to deal with. But I don't know. I hope that you have a sense of resilience. You know the definition of resilience?
The curriculum's not great.
The resilience, the ability to endure when times are hard, right? I mean, my example of your guys' resilience is through some of our outdoor activities, right?
Yeah, there's definitely a few.
And week-long kayak trips.
Yeah, that's what I remember.
Yeah. Fondly or
I remember them.
So I think your ability to keep going, persevere when you're tired, when you're frustrated, when it's raining, when you feel like your muscles cold. I always remember my mom never complained. She did her job. She worked as a nurse. She did 12-hour shifts, 4 days on, 4 days off. And I never, she never complained. And that's something when someone asks, who do you look up to? Who's your hero? I'm always my mom. She always just showed up. She always just had this amazing positive attitude and incredible energy and openness and friendliness. She'd probably come home from work of a 12-hour shift, and me and your Uncle Daryl had 40 kids in the house and there's just like shoes everywhere. And she'd like come in and say hi and like go up and have dinner. Like this is when we were teenagers and in Powell River in the same house that they're still in now.
Yep.
And she was awesome. Like, I don't know. I'm like super grateful for my mom.
Yeah.
Like her courage to come over and her courage to like be in a different culture, different language, different everything.
Yeah. We
She's-
probably wouldn't be in the position we are in now if it wasn't for her.
Yeah.
So, and it's really important to learn about your family history just to see where you come from and what is behind you. So, and even like what you're alive for, like why are you here? And it gives you even a purpose of just like knowing like what you're doing here.
Hmm.
I mean, the first time that I got mentioned that she mentioned it to me, I was kind of like, I don't really want to do this. Like, it's not really the type of thing that I would really want to do. But then once she kind of like gave me an kind of more, not really an excuse, but just like kind of proved to me that like, if this is a really good way to have our history documented, and yeah, once I pass, like all of this history is just going to get forgotten. So like, it's kind of just continuing the legacy that even like your parents, even your grandparents, like just continuing it going.
Do you feel like you have more gratitude?
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. They work their butts off, right? Like if you think
Yeah.
about it, it's like, wow, somebody worked really hard so that I could have what I have now
Yeah.
and be where I am now.
Yeah.
Pretty
And
lucky.
it like kind of, you need to be more grateful in life too. Because like the stuff that other people have endured, and like even in your own family, which is what we're talking about now, like little things don't matter that much. Yeah. So just let things go.
Love you.
Love you too.
Ladies and gentlemen, children of all ages, we've come to the end of our series. And the only thing I have left to say is thank you. Thank you to the viewer. Thank you to our senior guests, our teen guests, and thank you to our lovely crew. I really appreciate everybody being involved in this project. It's been a joy putting this thing together. I've always said from the beginning that this was a community project. I wanted to showcase Parksville in the best way that we could by connecting our senior demographic with the younger audience, and I think that we achieved that. But this will not be real unless the next step is fulfilled, and that is in the hands of you guys. I really do hope that you're inspired to have these conversations yourself. It is so valuable to be talking with strangers, to be talking with family members. There's going to come a day that these stories may be lost to the sands of time. And that is the last thing that I want. That's why I believe in podcasting. That's why I believe in writing. That's why I believe in tea time and sharing these stories with our community. So I hope this inspires all you guys to knock on some doors, to make some phone calls, and to really share what makes our community great, which is our stories. From Patio Studio, I'm Clinton Nellist. Thank you for watching Branches Between Generations. I guess there's just one last thing to do. Hi, Mom. I finished the podcast.